Welcome to my channel Homeschool Learner Know the World. Today we will learn about werewolf. In folklore, a werewolf or occasionally lycanthrope is a human with the ability to shapeshift into a wolf, either purposely or after being placed under a curse or affliction, with the transformation occurring on the night of a full moon. Early sources for belief in disability or affliction called lycanthropy are Petronius and Gervase of Tilbury. The werewolf is a widespread concept in European folklore, existing in many variants, which are related by a common development of a Christian interpretation of underlying European folklore developed during the medieval period. From the early modern period, werewolf beliefs also spread to the New World with colonialism. Belief in werewolf developed in parallel to the belief in witches. In the course of the late Middle Ages and the early modern period, like the witchcraft trials as a whole, the trial of supposed werewolf emerged in what is now Switzerland in the early 15th century and spread throughout Europe in the 16th, peaking in the 17th and subsiding by the 18th century. The persecution of werewolves and the associated folklore is an integral part of the witch hunt phenomenon, albeit a marginal one. Accusation of lycanthropy being involved in only a small fraction of witchcraft trials. During the early period, accusation of lycanthropy were mixed with accusation of wolf riding or wolf charming. The case of Peter Sturm led to a significant peak in both interest in and persecution of supposed werewolves, primarily in French-speaking and German-speaking Europe. The phenomenon persisted longest in Bavaria and Austria, with persecution of wolf charmers recorded until well after 1650. The final cases taking place in the early 18th century in Carinthia and Styria. After the end of the witch trials, the werewolf became of interest in folklore studies and in the emerging Gothic horror genre. Werewolf fiction as a genre has pre-modern precedents in medieval romances and developed in the 18th century out of the semi-fictional chapbook tradition. The trappings of horror literature in the 20th century become part of the horror and fantasy genre of modern popular culture. The word werewolf comes from the Old English word werewolf, a compound of wer, which means man, and wolf, which means wolf. The only Old High German testimony is in the form of a given name werewolf, although an early Middle High German werewolf is found in Burchard of Worms and Berthold of Rosenberg. The word or concept does not occur in medieval German poetry or fiction, gaining popularity only from the 15th century. Middle Latin Gerulfus Anglo-Norman Werewolf, Old Frankish werewolf. Old Norse had the cognate werulfur, but because of the high importance of werewolves in Norse mythology, there were alternative terms such as Alfedin. In modern Scandinavian, Keviltalf was also used, evening wolf, presumably after the name of Keviltalf Basal Fashion, a historical berserker of the 9th century who figures in the Icelandic sagas. The term lycanthropy, referring both to the ability to transform oneself into a wolf and to the act of so doing, comes from ancient Greek lycanthropos. The word does occur in ancient Greek sources but only in late antiquity, only rarely and only in the context of clinical lycanthropy described by Galen, where the patient had the ravenous aptitude, and other qualities of a wolf. The Greek word attains some currency only in Byzantine Greek, featuring in the 10th century Encyclopedia Suda. Use of the Greek derived lycanthropy in English occurs in learned writing beginning in the later 16th century. At first, explicitly for clinical lycanthropy, namely the type of insanity where the patient imagines to have transformed into a wolf, and not in reference to supposedly real shapeshifting. Use of lycanthropy for supposed shapeshifting is much later introduced, ca 1830. Slavic uses the term valkodalak, literary wolf skin, paralleling the Old Norse Alfedin. However, the word is not attested in the medieval period. The Slavic term was loaned into modern Greek as Vairokoulakas. Baltic has related terms. Lithuanian Vilkolakis and Vilkatas is a corruption due to the Russian poet Alexander Pushkin, which was later widely spread by A.K. Tolstoy in his novella The Family of the Vordalak. The werewolf folklore found in Europe harks back to common development during the Middle Ages, arising in the context of Christianization and the associated interpretation of pre-Christian mythology in Christian terms. Their underlying common origin can be traced back to Proto-Indo-European mythology, where lycanthropy is reconstructed as an aspect of the initiation of the warrior class. This is reflected in Iron Age Europe in the Ticker descriptions from the Germanic sphere, among others. The standard comparative overview of this aspect of Indo-European mythology in McCone. Such transformation of men into wolves in pagan cult were associated with the devil from the early medieval perspective. The concept of the werewolf in Western and Northern Europe is strongly influenced by the role of the wolf in Germanic paganism. But there are related traditions in other parts of Europe which were not necessarily influenced by Germanic tradition, especially in Slavic Europe and Balkans, and possibly in areas bordering the Indo-European spheres, or where Indo-European cultures have been replaced by military conquest in the medieval era. In his Man in Wolf, 1948, Robert Eisler tried to cast the Indo-European tribal names meaning wolf or wolfman in terms of the European transition from fruit gathering to predatory hunting.